So whenever you're ready, I want you to close your eyes down with me. We're going to do this together. I want you to take a really big, deep inhale in through your nose. Fill up all the way. Brief hold at the top if you can find it. And then take a big open mouth blow. Exhale your breath out. Good. We'll do that 2 more times together. Big, deep breath in. Hold at the top and then let your breath go naturally. Good. One last and final time. Big, deep breath in. Hold at the top and then let it all go. Good. Whenever you're ready, tuck your chin down towards your chest. And then gently blink your eyes open whenever you're ready. Oh my God, Becca, it is so good to see you. So fun. I love that we got to chat before we actually got on here because you are one of the very few reasons of literally why I'm doing interviews on this podcast. So I just want to thank you for that and giving me the space to kind of open up this crazy project that
I love it.
Kind of now that we're doing. So I kind of want to start with your story. Okay. How did we get into therapy? How does one get into therapy? And I kind of want to hear a little bit more about your story.
Okay. So this is my second career. I had a more non-traditional navigation to becoming a therapist. I used to be a contract negotiator for an oil and gas company.
Like what?
Yeah. My poor husband, that's how he met me. We did the same thing, I swear. We met at a happy hour. He still does what I used to do, but I was a landman. Nothing like the show, but I was a landman.
Oh,
for 7 years. So it would be a disservice to my history if I didn't mention my childhood. I grew up in an abusive home. My biological father was a real treat. But I grew up the youngest of 4, and my bio dad was pretty abusive to my mom and my 3 older siblings. And I was insulated from it. But at 35, I can now recognize that just because I was insulated doesn't mean that it wasn't abuse. And so my perspective of the world and the way I approached the world became very guarded. So super, I'm okay, super independent, super don't worry about me. I hated hugs when I was a kid and even into my teen years and into adulthood. And so that was kind of the foundation of what was my first 25 years in the world. My parents got divorced when I was in the 5th grade. And then my mom married who I call my dad, my stepdad, who was a kind and gentle and patient man who has his own stuff too. But I went from one reality to another without ever figuring out what that meant. And then in my teen years, I think as a lot of us do, I had some mental health issues, just a bad breakup and stuff like that sent me to therapy for the first time since the divorce. And I talked to my sessions were at 10 p.m. with this old man who kind of looked like George R.R. Martin, swear to God. I saw him for a couple of months and just talked about my feelings, right? I think I was 17 or 18 at the time. And then I went to college and I went to Texas Tech and I went to the business school because in my 18-year-old mind, success means that I was going to be in business. And then I ended up in my first career because one of the professors for business law told me I'd be good at it. So I just went along, right? I graduate with my bachelor's. I start working at a company. I'm making great money and I'm there. I moved to Midland for a couple of years.
Love it.
Came back to Dallas about 10 years ago next month, same company. And I stayed with that company until 2019. I met my husband in 2017. And in 2018, I kind of really started opening myself up to healing. So I started seeing a certain kind of chiropractor who does a lot of nervous system work. And then my relationship with my husband was obviously really secure and really validating. And I started to get curious about if I really liked what I did or if I was just doing it for the money. And then through a series of projects that were not super engaging for me and managers that I didn't really get along with, I finally started contemplating leaving the company that I was with and looking at other oil and gas jobs. And then when I opened that door, the door to it doesn't have to be oil and gas opened too. So I got back into therapy in 2018. And then in 2019, my company announced that they were going to be doing layoffs. And so I had a couple of conversations and I kind of made it known that I was unhappy and I got laid off. Before the layoffs happened, I was already contemplating what I wanted to do. And so I had actually signed up for night classes to see if psychology even interested me at all. Layoffs came, the severance package was wonderful. And I decided to go to yoga teacher training. And at that point, things just started to kind of fall into place, yoga teacher training. You know what? I think I want to be a therapist. And I talked to my therapist at the time. And then my husband was like, if that's what you want to do it. And so I applied for my master's program and I started my master's in January of 2020. Gosh, all online already. So I went back to Texas Tech, the Health Sciences Center, to get my master's. So it was all already virtual. I remember emailing one of my professors and being like, I can't find enough resources for this paper paper that we need to write because the library is closed down. So I started my master's in 2020, and I immediately was like, this is it. Like, this is what I, like, yes, I'm here. In 21, I lost my dog. And that was life-changing for me. I lost Moose. And so I got back into therapy while I was in school. And I started realizing like the effects of my experience, my grief, the loss. And then when I lost Moose, my trauma really started barreling back into my life because he was my protector. I got him when I left my hometown, and my hometown is where all the bad shit happened. So I'm in therapy. I'm starting to see clients on a practicum basis, and my clients have little sprinklings of trauma, little sprinklings of things. And in yoga teacher training, I was not sure what population I wanted to work with. And then I see these little sprinklings of trauma. And then I got my full internship at a place called Irving Family Advocacy Center, which is run by the Irving Police Department. And most cities have a child advocacy center for children who have experienced crime, abuse, those kinds of things. But Irving is one of the only places in the nation that offers it for the entire family, which is wild. Irving, Texas it's the Irving Family Advocacy Center. And if you live in Irving, work in Irving, or if you're a victim of a crime in Irving, you can get free services through this advocacy center.
Wow.
The Irving Police Department also has mental health squads. So they send out, if there's like mental health or homeless related cases, they send out, it's 2 police officers and a licensed counselor that go to the scene. They're in khakis and a black polo, and they're not in like the true uniform. Mm-hmm. And it was just like Irving. Obviously, that was a lot of trauma. And when I interviewed, I said, I've been really drawn to trauma and I'm really interested in it. And I actually applied at Genesis first, and they didn't have space for me. And one of the questions that they asked me during my interview was, okay, well, given that you have a history of trauma, how do you think you're going to manage this? And I was like, that's exactly why I want to do this, right? Is this history that I have, that I've navigated on my own in so many ways, even though I didn't have to. I want to help people through that. Like, I want to hold space for what feels like the worst thing you've ever experienced, because sometimes it is. Sometimes it's one of the worst things. And that was my first brush with adults with childhood trauma, but more explicitly childhood sexual trauma. Like, it's one of my niche populations is adults who experience childhood sexual trauma. And that I was just in and holding space in that way. It was just like, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I finished out my hours and graduated and went into private practice, and I'm a trauma therapist, right? That is my specialty.
Especially when we get into our lower to mid 30s, we start to backtrack on our stories and start to realize like how connected everything had to be with the disconnection that we had throughout our childhood, our teens, our 20s, to then have that spark. And some of us can be really lucky to have it in our 20s. I wasn't as nearly as lucky, but to find that thing to be like, oh, now this clicks, this makes sense for me. And I just think it's so fascinating that on our journeys, we'll start to see those little niches or pockets of moments where we're like, oh, this is where it clicks, but it's so connected to our entire story. And that's what I find is so wild. But I kind of want to talk about trauma a little bit, obviously, since this is kind of your background. Since I come from a more holistic background with fairly little trauma experience, things I've done, practices and teachings and education things that are more breathwork focused or meditation focused, and it's trauma informed, which, is a funny thing. Because in my world right now, it's the wild, wild west of how breathwork and meditation is kind of now blooming. But, I don't have a background in therapy at all, but people will use me as an acting therapist, which I've had to navigate in a very interesting tone of like, I can only do so much for you in my certain ways. And then working with therapists like you. A term that I hear all the time is big T and little t.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to talk about that a little bit.
So as a society, have defined trauma as an event. Right. And so the trauma is that this event occurs, and that is trauma. But then we start sprinkling trauma, like my trauma, my triggers, all of these things everywhere. And so it gets so convoluted so quickly. So what I like to do is recognize that my definition of trauma as a trauma therapist is is different than what most people might think of it as. So my definition of trauma is not actually the event that occurred. It's the response to the event. So the example that I give here, typically when I'm explaining this to clients, because we are all so resistant to calling our experiences traumatic, is that let's say there's a mom driving her 2 kids down the street. She's driving down the road and she goes to turn and she doesn't check her blind spot. So she goes to go over, doesn't check her blind spot, clips a car, spins out, hits a telephone pole. Kids are in the back seat, they get out. Son is like, oh my God, that was so cool. Grand Theft Auto, let's do it again. Daughter gets out and is a little shaken up, touches, checks. She's like, okay, I'm okay, we're okay. Mom is in a spiral. I'm a terrible mother. I'm a terrible driver. I almost killed my children. What is happening? And mom is so worked up that mom starts to have a panic attack. Daughter then sees mom having the panic attack and freaks out. Son is still oblivious. The trauma for mom was the car accident. The trauma for daughter was the panic attack, the fear that her mom saw. Son wasn't really traumatized by the experience. And so we can't say that my trauma was this car accident. We can say that I was traumatized by this experience. My response felt traumatic. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%.
And so that's like the first aspect of this trauma definition, because when you have that broad aspect, little t and big T become easier to understand. It's not about whether or not that event was awful, terrible, horrible. It's about how it affected us. So big T trauma would be the things that in general we can all understand. A house fire, personal experience, natural disaster, violent crime, traumatic loss or tragic death, unexpected things. We all kind of get it when it comes to big T trauma, sexual abuse, assault, those kinds of things. Little T trauma is much more nuanced because it not only can be very brushed under the rug, but it compounds. And so little T might plant a seed, but then the next little T goes directly into that pot where that seed's planted, and instead of one flower, you now have 4. So little T trauma is more like feeling like you didn't belong, feeling unloved, minor bullying, perceptions of experiences, feeling left out, those kinds of things. But it compounds to the effect that it can be as bad as one big T trauma, and a bunch of little T trauma can create the category of complex trauma or complex PTSD, as can big T trauma. But they're not interchangeable, but they have a very significant experience or influence on someone's experience.
And you know what's so fascinating about that is that, I am a firm believer we can't get out of life without
No, absolutely not.
Anything.
No.
And so we're all walking around with so much of our, whether it's big T or a bunch of little T's as we just progress, not only in our childhood, but also in adulthood. And just like the book, The Body Keeps Score, every time something happens or our reaction of how something happens is now held in our body. So can you speak to that at all about how when we are moving through these big T or little T traumas, or we start to realize, oh, this is actually affecting me, whether that's more anxiety or more depression or more awareness of, oh, this is how I'm moving through my life and I'm not sure if I enjoy moving through my life this much.
Yeah.
Can you speak to how that affects the body, but also how we can start to maybe pinpoint and help support ourselves through those things?
So I think, The Body Keeps the Score is great. People have its issues with it. And it's also so dense. It's so dense and it's really targeted toward the clinician. And so there's a book that I prefer that also, every book has its issues. People have issues with it, but there's a book that I prefer called What Happened to You.
Love that book.
Bruce Perry and Oprah.
Yes.
And so I think I should point out now that as a therapist, I don't like diagnosing. Not because I don't think that it serves a purpose. I do. I understand in medicine and for insurance and healthcare and whatever that we need to be able to point to something. But diagnosis for me communicates to someone that what they're experiencing is problematic or abnormal. Whereas in a lot of instances, our responses are normal responses to really shitty things that happen to us, right? Like your dog died and you're still grieving 6 months later because you had your dog for 12 years. I don't have depression. I'm grieving and I'm moving through a deeply seated loss. My parents screamed at each other all the time. So loud noises makes me anxious. That's because your system thought you were in danger. It makes sense that you're responding that way. So that, I think, is the important thing to recognize here, is that when we're talking about how we move through it, while we want to get back to the seed, we also want to recognize that the symptoms, or what we're calling symptoms, are responses that make sense because we didn't process what happened to us.
As you're talking about this, the thing that keeps going in my mind is the nervous system, because that's my background. And, you know, the nervous system is becoming such a trendy word these days, you know, which comes with pros and can come with quite a few cons. With the background that you have, I want to hear a little bit more about what you think about the trendiness of how the nervous system has now come in, and like just talking more about that to like really pinpoint more deeply about the nervous system and the importance of it, and how it actually affects the body and our mind and everything.
So I mentioned earlier that like my whole like pivot point was I started working with a chiropractor who really focused on nervous system regulation. And I kind of love that we're all talking about the nervous system. And in the same breath, I also kind of hate it, because lately my Instagram has been bombarded with ads about my dog's nervous system being dysregulated. And like, does my dog, one of my dogs is a rescue, does he have trauma? Yes. Is his nervous system dysregulated? Yes. Do I actually think that your 7-day course is going to regulate his nervous system? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that the vagus nerve, you're familiar with the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is this information highway. And I think the average person thinks that the brain runs the show and the body is along for the ride. But it's something like 20% of the information goes down from the brain to the body on the vagus nerve, and like 80% is coming from the body up to the brain. And so we like to pretend that we're all here, but that's because we've put ourselves there by cutting ourselves off from our experience. So again, it's a love-hate relationship with the pop culture of it all. But if my body doesn't feel safe and my brain is telling me, get over it, you're safe, then your body's going to say, okay, shut up, we'll put that away for later. And for some people, later comes, and for some people, later never comes. And they sit with this discomfort or this sense of dysregulation, or I'm always on edge, or God, my temper's so short, or like everything sets me off, or my stomach always hurts, or I have terrible bathroom issues, like so many different things. And those are all indicative of the body experiencing something and storing that information. And not always, right? Like everything comes with an asterisk of sometimes and maybe. But did you know that there's a high correlation between IBS and individuals who experienced childhood trauma?
That doesn't surprise me at all.
There's a Kaiser Permanente study called the ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences, and it was a longitudinal study done. I don't even know how long the study was done for. But the ACEs asked, I think it's like 10 questions that asks about childhood experiences. And the higher your ACEs score is, the more likely that you are to have chronic health issues, including heart disease, mental health issues, digestive issues, chronic pain, fibromyalgia, just all kinds of things. And the problem is that we all say correlation doesn't equal causation. And oftentimes the medical world, which is where diagnoses come from, they don't want to say that childhood trauma affects us this badly because everyone has childhood trauma. We're all dealing with something. And so if that's true and childhood trauma influences us, then, hey, insurance, yes, this person does need prolonged therapy. So I like the nervous system conversation. I appreciate that it's happening because I do think that it's starting to pull American medicine into the conversation of how our bodies experience things. Emotionally, physically, and mentally. And I don't know if your 7-day course is going to regulate my rescue dog.
Or yourself at all.
Yeah. And I think that clients benefit a lot from education on the nervous system. And I think that it's also so individualized. It's a fine line. It's a precarious situation that we're in, which is why everything I say has a little asterisk.
Has to, truly. And that's what I think is so interesting when it comes to like very individualized support. There truly is no magic pill for any one person, because some individuals, like you mentioned, like probably potentially need to be on some extra support, while others it's, no, I'm just in a grieving phase. I don't have depression. This is just a moment in time where I'm just going through a more difficult time. There's so many tools out there, so many tools, and much more therapeutic tools. And now holistic tools are coming in and becoming really popular as well. I kind of want to talk about and speak to a lot of those tools when you are going through certain stages or phases of life. But what tools could you pinpoint as a great place to start with individuals? Is there something, or is it going to be totally different across the board?
You know that cliche, oh God, I hate this cliche. I really do. And it's so true. Emotions are just energy in motion. God, it makes me cringe. It feels very like live, laugh, lovey. I hate it. But it's true, right? Like our emotions are energy. There is an energetic experience that happens in our body. And so something that everyone could probably benefit from is more movement. And I don't mean a HIIT class. I don't mean a spin class. I don't even mean a yoga class. I literally mean standing up and doing some side bends and then a forward fold and then opening through the chest just to get your spine moving. One of the tools that my clients respond to the best and the fastest is shaking. So there's the somatic expression of shaking your hands, right? And like letting it come, and like maybe you bend into the knees and stuff, but just shaking it off gives that energy a place to go. Movement, like you said, does look different for everyone. My personal back pocket grounding technique for me, and I'm not going to recommend this to anyone else, but for me, is a handstand, a wall-supported handstand. If I'm dysregulated, if I feel like I'm taking on too much energy, if I'm in a class and I'm exhausted, I'm going to find a space, I don't care how exposed it is, where I'm going to kick up into a handstand and I'm just going to breathe. Because that is a space where my body is literally turned upside down and it feels like someone pulled the plug on all of the stimulation for me. Someone just like let the bathtub drain. It's individualized. Shaking is probably the safer entrance to this.
No, and I really love that so much because I'm such a believer in finding the things that support you best. And it's such, I wish it wasn't the case, but it's such a trial and error. And there are going to be some seasons where I'm a firm believer where things are going to really work for me. And like some seasons for me, I'm like constantly doing breath work and it feels really supportive. And then some seasons of life, I'm like, if I do one more breath work practice, I might do something wild and crazy.
Yeah, my handstand is that's like me opening the fire extinguisher to put something out. And speaking of fire, what's interesting is when my husband and I had a house fire last year, the thing that regulated me the most wasn't talk therapy. It was chiropractic care. It was going to a chiropractor here and having the energy adjusted physically to move it through my system. Nothing else was meditation. Nothing was helping my system say, hey, you're safe. Until it was Madison Smith, until I laid down on her table and I felt held in like the most beautiful way. Like you said, it depends, but you have to try things. Because if one more person had told me, you just need to take some deep breaths, I'd be like, I do this for a living. The breathing's not working.
I totally and utterly agree. And to your point, it's so funny because there's some days where the only thing that calms me down is sitting in silence, which like, what? So bizarre.
I drive home in silence every day after I do client work. Every day. No radio, nothing. I do it a lot more than just then, but like that's intentional. My husband will get in the car and be like, we'll be 2 miles from the house. And he's like, are you going to turn on music? And I was like, oh yeah, we can. Do you want some?
I feel like that too is such an underrated tool because I feel like there's so many times where we are just completely bombarded, especially when it comes to social media, when it comes to work, when there's always lights, camera, action all the time. We're always listening to something. There's always something going on. Someone's always cutting us off in traffic. Traffic's only getting worse. There's so many things. And we have so many responsibilities, either that are self-inflicted responsibilities or responsibilities that others put on us or responsibilities we continue to put on ourselves. But the silence can be something that's really wild because the first few times that you do it, you feel like you're going to go stir crazy. And then after you find yourself doing it consistently, maybe just for 30 seconds, a minute, 90 seconds, and then you build up to like 5 minutes and you're like, ooh, this is really interesting. Then you can hear your mind running, which I find wild. The stories that I find myself telling myself, I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. I didn't know that was there. It's kind of like a different way of journaling to me in a way.
I have a secret. I tell all of my clients to journal and they all know that I never journal. I journal when I'm on vacation and there's a cup of coffee in front of me. It's a beautiful sunrise and I'm on the beach. But like in my day-to-day life, it's just not going to happen for me. And I'm okay with that. But my space for quiet reflection is my drive home. It's a space where like things do turn off. I have ADHD, so my brain she's loud. She's a little loud. And so in those moments in that space, just to be existing is what helps me to go home without what I listened to for 4, 5, 6 hours that day.
So kind of continuing on that note, I feel like everyone or the trend in like health and wellness right now, I mean, it's getting less trendy, thank goodness, but like the morning routines, the night routines, the personal work, the self-reflection.
We're all so busy all the time.
And what I find is so fascinating is like, there are some days where I really want to be the best version of myself. I want to continue to improve. But then there's some days where I'm like, you know, we are so lucky we got out of bed and we're just literally right here, right now. And I cannot add one more thing onto my to-do list. In seasons where you are wanting to be more active on that personal growth journey, how important is it to have someone beside you on that journey to help facilitate and support you? Also, do your own work. And what are your thoughts on that?
So given what I do for a living, I will always have a therapist. I should say, I don't think I said this. So I am a trauma therapist, but, and the umbrella of trauma, but my specialty is complex PTSD. And, my two niche populations are firefighters and adults who experience prolonged sexual trauma. You can imagine that the stuff that I hold space for is very heavy, to say the least. It's stimulating. And so one, I'm a proponent of perpetual therapy just for a support source. And I'm not saying that because I'm a therapist. I'm saying that because you got to do something to get it out of your head. And so I will be a perpetual. Right now I'm biweekly with my therapist. Maybe sometime at some point we might be monthly. Maybe we'll go back to weekly, but actually, I'm not biweekly because my husband and I are also in couples therapy for the health of our relationship. So between the two of us, we have 3 therapists and each other. And I think that we hold space for each other in a really beautiful way as we're moving through things. But I also think like there's only so much we can do for each other. We need those outside parties. I like journaling. I am the kind of person that I'm not always going to be the most accountable to what I need for myself. Like I'm just not. Life happens. And so someone outside of me reminding me, hey, what you're going through is really hard, or hey, this is normal, or hey, that's okay, is going to be what I need. But I'm also an external processor. Some people might not like it. For those people, there's apps, there's friends, there's those kinds of things. But as long as there's a space of self-reflection and a general awareness, then I think you can be okay. But I don't think a lot of us come to those two things very naturally. I don't think that those are... One, we weren't taught, right? Like the generations before us just didn't know healthy expressions of anger or self-expression or processing. I struggle to find a generalizable aspect of it because there's going to be somebody that hates journaling just like I do. And there's going to be somebody who doesn't want to text themselves like I do. And there's going to be someone who doesn't want to talk to a therapist. And so I think you just have to find what feels better for you, but you also have to pay attention to what actually feels better and what doesn't feel better.
I love that. So if you were to list tools that if someone were like, I have no idea where to even begin and like, what is self-reflection? What is self-realization? What tools would you put on the list for something like that? And they can be big, they can be small.
Feelingswheel.com. It's just a website that has a feelings wheel. The average person would probably name 6 feelings. Happy, sad, mad, scared, disgusted, surprised. But the human experience is so much more nuanced than that. Being exposed to just the feelings wheel and saying like, this is how I feel today is a really helpful way to recognize that 2-way path. This is what's happening in my body, and that's where my brain is, that vagus nerve. So being able to just expand your emotional language would be the first tool. The second tool, I think, would be finding movement for your body that feels good. And then the third would be recognizing that an exhale is therapeutic. The interesting thing about our nervous system is we're all thinking like, take a deep breath. You need to take a deep breath. It's the exhale that matters. People forget that as you inhale, your nervous system is actually moving towards the sympathetic because like you just have this injection of oxygen and you're opening up. Exhale that calms us. It's the expulsion of carbon dioxide.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
I was like, yes. I was like, let's get it, girl.
Yeah. And so I think that those are my top 3 is understanding what you're feeling, finding movement that does feel better for your body, and knowing that your breath is actually going to be your anchor. There's an app that I love called How We Feel, which is kind of like an interactive feelings wheel.
Oh, cool.
And it gives you the definition of each of the emotions as you click on it. And that is like the secret sauce for people who look at a feelings wheel and say like, I don't know what vulnerable feels like.
I love that so much. Okay. So as you've been working with clients for quite some time now in this new realm, I mean, every single day you're handling and holding space for something. And obviously, like you mentioned, some things can be a little bit heavier than others day to day, obviously. How do you protect your own energy when you are having to hold space for things as heavy as they are day to day?
Great question. I'm still figuring it out. I had some energy body work done a couple of weeks ago, and that was a question that she asked me while she was kind of working through some of my stuff. And I literally was like, great question. I don't really know yet. And started sobbing on the table, just sobbing. It's a practice. Our needs vary so much. It's trial and error for me. Something that I do when I play sound baths, when I play the singing bowls, is I imagine a bubble right around me. Like I can't let this energy in right now because I have to be here. Sometimes I'm listening, but I have a mantra in my head, and the mantra, it sounds so cold, but I'm going to admit it's just like a podcast. It's just like a podcast. I no longer listen to murder podcasts or crime podcasts or anything like that because I got a plug, right? I'm straight in the source. But a way that I help my body to kind of keep separate from it is to recognize that it doesn't have to be mine. It's someone else's story. And then I have a really lovely therapy dog. Her name's Abelie or Abe or Stinky, but she's this 75-pound shedding Labradoodle. And if you've ever met her, you would love her. She sleeps, snores, farts, and tells people when they're too upset. And so having her in session with me also feels really grounding.
As you continue to hold space for others, how do you help teach people to hold space for others as well, with themselves, but with others too?
I mean, from the world of mindfulness that the observational lens, like the role of the gentle observer, helps us to kind of, in the same way my mantra of it's just a podcast, helps us to see, feel, and hold what's going on without attaching it to ourselves. And I think that the attachment to it, or the taking things personally, is where things can start to get really messy. And so the zoom out is important. And some people don't feel capable of zooming out physically, mentally, emotionally. And that's where the other trendy thing of psychedelics, that's where psychedelics come in, especially for my clients who have a history of complex trauma. I work a lot in ketamine right now. I'm trained in MDMA, in psilocybin, and in ketamine. And as of right now, ketamine's the only legally accessible thing in the state of Texas. And so I work with clients with ketamine to help zoom out, dissociate in a healthy way. Ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic, so it's not actually a true psychedelic. And so what it does is, if you can't see the label from inside the jar, ketamine takes you out of the jar. And that experience of being zoomed out under the influence of ketamine also helps to develop that tool in your daily life of being zoomed out. Zoomed out doesn't mean disconnected. It just means that it's observing and experiencing and not judging.
I feel like there can be so many tools that people think can be, that can be a quicker fix. In this kind of healing therapeutic world that you're in, and you continue to hear like, is there a quick fix? What is kind of your response to that?
No, there's not, right? Like, I don't care what drug you take. I don't care how much EMDR you do. I don't care how much meditating you do. You're still a living, breathing human being that's going to experience highs and lows and ups and downs and discomfort and comfort and connection and disconnection. And you're going to experience it all. And that's kind of the fucking point. Like, experiencing life is the entire point of life. Does that mean that these tools won't help you to better understand your experiences or help you to gain a sense of self-awareness around what you are experiencing? No, they absolutely will. But will they fix it? No. I once had a client and we were talking about something, and they said to me, I felt really triggered by this, and I was really frustrated that I felt triggered by this. And I was like, well, what's the frustration? And they're like, well, I already did EMDR over this. And I was like, yeah, you did. And you did EMDR for that memory. And so your system has a better sense of what's happening, but you've also had a decade of habituation to this behavior and this fear. EMDR doesn't make that disappear, right? Ketamine's not going to make that disappear. We still have to have the sense of self-care, self-awareness, self-reflection, so we can understand what we're coming into contact with. And there's a quote by Viktor Frankl about stimulus and response. And he talks about how between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space lies our power to choose. I'm paraphrasing. But what happens in therapy is that we take the space between stimulus and response and we make it bigger. Right? We make the system able to respond instead of reacting. So the entire goal in my work as a therapist is to create space between stimulus and response. And I don't mean time. I mean distance. I mean capacity. I mean awareness.
The word that you mentioned in there, which I find fascinating, trigger. You know, that's another trendy word that I've been noticing coming up in this space quite a lot where, oh, I'm triggered by this. I'm triggered by that. And it's a really funny word that has been so popularized. What are your thoughts on that?
I appreciate the word trigger because I think that it helps people communicate something that they wouldn't have the ability to communicate. I think the disconnect lies in recognizing what that word actually means for them. What they're saying, what someone's typically saying when they're triggered is that they're uncomfortable, that they're experiencing discomfort. Something happened and their system said, I don't like that. It doesn't mean that it's triggered a traumatic event. It doesn't mean that you're having a PTSD flashback. It doesn't mean that you're walking off the edge of a cliff because your depression and anxiety is so awful. It just means that something occurred and the way that your system responded to it felt dysregulated, felt uncomfortable. Therapeutic words have this tendency to get picked up and spread out. And then people get really pissed that they get spread out. The reason I think that people get upset that they get spread out and misused is because we're not allowing the word to evolve, right? Like PTSD triggers, that's a thing. But in the common day where someone's like, that triggered me, what you mean is that bothered you, that made you experience discomfort. But if you don't have the language to recognize that you're feeling discomfort, then triggered is where you're going to go. Because the majority of us, triggered means it made me mad, made me angry. But the thing about anger is that anger is typically a response to what we're actually feeling behind the anger. And we just move into anger or frustration or annoyance because it feels safer. It feels more powerful. It feels less vulnerable.
You know, over the past couple of years too, I feel like mental health has been destigmatized a little bit.
Yes and no, a lot and a little bit.
So being in this space and dealing with a lot of obviously clinical mental health support in this way and seeing how the dogma has shifted ever so ever so slightly, a little bit, or maybe a lot. How do you handle the shifts and the changes in this destigmatized world, but maybe also conversation around mental health has been?
So I'll remind you that one of my populations is firefighters. And if you can imagine firefighters coming into my office with my singing bowls and my Palo Santo and my snoring dog, and I'm probably wearing some variation of shorts and a t-shirt. And while I'm 35, I do believe that I look a little bit younger. So they're walking into this room of this hippie girl going what the fuck am I supposed to get out of this, right? And so first and foremost, I think that the biggest thing that I do is that I show up as a human being and I say, how human of you. One of the biggest tools that I have in my toolbox as a therapist is to be a human being who is messy and does have triggers and gets dysregulated and has those experiences. And I tend to be very honest with my clients about hey, one, what you're doing is human. This makes sense. And we all do it. It's not you're not excluded from the group. Some people just aren't talking about it.
Are there certain patterns? Obviously, you work in a very specific realm and your focus is a little bit more specific, just like every therapist. I feel like that
I'm way more niche than a lot of therapists are. If you look at my Psychology Today profile, you know what boxes aren't checked? Anxiety or depression. They're not, because that's not what I do. I navigate life transitions. I help people create a life that they love. And I'm here to support you through your trauma.
When it comes to working with clients and similar thought processes or stories that people tell themselves in certain aspects or ways, I've noticed in my personal history as being a facilitator or instructor, a lot of times things will be mirrored.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of our story of growth as a instructor or facilitator, since I'm more on the holistic side of things. There's certain seasons I'll see very similar patterns that can maybe not only connect to me, but can connect to people that maybe would never step into my space.
I find myself, there's weeks where I'm talking about the exact same thing with 20 different clients. A couple of weeks ago, so I mentioned earlier, I have a rescue dog. So we have 3 dogs. I have my therapy dog. I have my 12-year-old pit bull border collie. She's a ranch dog. She should be on a ranch, but she's not. She's a little anxious girl that sits on my couch. And then we have our rescue. His name's Arnold, the giant schnauzer. And we got Arnold when he was 2.5, and we were like his 5th or 6th home. And Arnold has sporadic reactivity issues. We've had him since 21, so he's gotten so much better. But there are still things about Arnold. Like Arnold still quite literally will get triggered and react. And for about 3 weeks now, I have used Arnold as an example of boundary setting every day. Because when people are going through something and they need to understand the concept, Arnold makes it more understandable. Because when we talk about boundaries, for example, because my work is big in boundaries right now, but boundaries, for example, is like, we all think of boundaries as like trying to keep people out. And in fact, boundaries are like an operating manual for how we keep people in, how we have a relationship with people. And with people, like a person to person, I think some people struggle to understand that. Like if I have a client who's trying to set boundaries with their mom or their partner or their roommate, they have a hard time understanding like what that means. And so I use Arnold as an example. Arnold wants to be loved so deeply that he wants to, every new person that comes to my house, Arnold wants to put his chin on their knee. He wants to be in their space. He wants to be touched. But Arnold only likes to be touched certain ways. Arnold doesn't like to be touched for a prolonged period of time. And Arnold has areas of his body that he despises being touched. So I know how to pet Arnold, where to pet Arnold, and for how long to pet Arnold. And I also have a signal for Arnold when I don't want to pet him. I cross my arms. Those are boundaries. Arnold lives in my house. I feed him. He loves my husband more than he loves me, which is thorn in my side because I rescued him. I adore Arnold. And I know that when I'm interacting with Arnold, these are the rules. That doesn't mean that I don't want to interact with Arnold. That doesn't mean that I'm trying not to interact with Arnold. That just means that this is what Arnold is capable of, so this is how I know where to position myself. This is what so-and-so is capable of. This is where I know to position myself. I position myself here because that's where I feel safe. I position myself in this realm because that is what I need to feel comfortable. But the season is boundaries. Yes, things do come in an intense season.
No, and I love hearing that because I feel like that's something that's so relatable. Mm-hmm. I mean, across the board, every single person I know can
benefit from boundaries.
100%. We're such a relational group. I mean, communities is something that is growing as far as wanting to build community, grow community, find community, search for community.
The loneliness epidemic
is such a thing right now. And boundaries, I think, is a huge aspect of that because as we want to grow and build community outside of maybe our initial friends, family, whatever unit that we're used to, I can see in a lot of not only my clients, but friends, they'll start to build community or make new friends. And they're like, oh, this is not the person I thought this was. And then they're having to learn how to set boundaries in certain ways. And that can go in romantic. That can be, I mean, I'm in a huge season of dating right now and like learning how to.
Stressful, also fun.
Stressful and fun. Yes. I mean, my
husband's therapist once told him, well, whether you're excited or afraid, your nervous system is responding the same way. So why don't we just call it excited?
Oh,
I know. I know. I wish I could be friends with my husband's therapist. It seems like she dropped some real freaking nuggets, but I'll never meet her.
Oh, no kidding.
I know.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
Boundaries. Hello. Yeah. We love that.
And hate them. They're hard. Anyways, yeah.
And what I think is so funny is that like, we all have to deal with boundaries of some sort, whether they're boundaries within ourselves and our self-inflicted boundaries or the boundaries that we have with others. As you're in the season of more boundaries, is there anything else that you'd want to add that could speak to maybe even me, but also anyone else in the season of life that's growing and trying to build community, bring more people in, maybe find a partner? I know that's not your realm, but I know that you're seeing that a lot.
So I'm a relational therapist. And what that means is that I prioritize my relationship with my client. And it's because it's a healing relationship. So I create a space in which ruptures are going to occur and repairs are going to occur. I create a space in which clients can experience when I fuck up, because I do, I guarantee I do, and when I own it. I recently apologized to a client because I did not like how I showed up in the last session. So the client came in and I said, hey, I think I owe you an apology for how we ended last time. And the client was like, no, you're fine. And I was like, I'm going to be really honest. I appreciate that. If I were you and my therapist had said that to me, I'd been like, are you fucking kidding me? And so I want to own that, first of all, that was not fair for me. It doesn't seem like it affected you, but I don't like how I showed up. And I think that you deserve my apology. And I think that you deserve to see my accountability here. And I think that that's something in boundaries that we have to recognize is in relationships. We're never going to have a ruptureless relationship. We're never going to have a friendship, a relationship where something doesn't kind of go a little sideways, a lot sideways, whatever the case may be. But that sense of one responsibility, so boundaries as a responsibility, and your own boundaries for yourself. My boundaries and how I show up are important to me. And so when I know that I cross my own boundaries, I'm going to take ownership of it. I'm going to recognize it. So, and the other side of that is being able to allow people to repair, to being open to the repair occurring, I think is an underdeveloped tool in a lot of people. Yeah. I'm really good at apologizing these days. And I think that, well, I've been really good at apologizing for a couple of years now. Yeah. And I think that that is a concept of boundaries that we also miss, right? My husband and I got into a fight a couple of years ago. We were arguing and I had messed up the night before. I can be very opinionated. And the night before we were on a double date and I said, and I feel very strongly about things. And so I said something and my husband was peeved about what I said. He was pissed off the next day, quite honestly. And we're in this argument and he's like, you know, you did this. And I was like, yes, but I apologized. I sent a text message. I said, hey, I'm so sorry if that was, because no one even told me that I hurt them. I said, hey, I'm so sorry. Like I get really passionate about things. I'm sorry if I took that too far. And my husband goes, you know, you're really good at apologizing. Maybe you should just stop fucking up. And when he listens to this episode, he's going to be so embarrassed because he would never say that again, right? Like that is a learning moment for him. He has come so far from there. But he said that to me and I looked at him and I was like, or maybe you should learn how to accept him. Ooh. Like maybe you should figure out how to let people be sorry. Maybe you should figure out how to let humans be humans. And when they're willing to own what they did, let them.
When it comes to relationships, that's what people don't talk about ever, is that, especially in romantic relationships, it's even more dismal because for friendships they can be low stakes for a long time. And then for romantic, it's pretty high stakes pretty quickly because everyone wants to be liked, everyone wants to be loved, and everyone wants to be desired. So it's like, you're always putting on your best face first off. And then as time grows, then you start to be more real. And then shit starts to hit the fan a little bit.
Things get uncomfy. You show up as a human being. Wow. Who expected that?
Crazy.
Yeah.
And
we make mistakes. Oh shit. We all do.
And the navigation of that, I think, is so huge because coming all around, full circle, we all have all of our stuff.
We all have something.
And it always comes out in our relationships, I feel like, the most. Not only the relationship that we have with ourselves.
We're hardwired for connection. And not only are we hardwired for connection, it's required for our survival. And we learn fallacies about connection. We learn fantasies. We learn falsehoods. We learn perfection. And those things just don't occur in the real world. To be seen, we have to see other people. And we have to know that just like I'm coming here with my story, whatever that story is, so are they. They're coming with their own story. And that story might have nothing to do with me, but I'm the space where they need to heal it. And I'm the container in which they can heal it. My husband and I, in our wedding vows, had a poem by Marie Rainier Wilkie. Okay. I'll fact check it. But it talks about how regardless of how close you become in a relationship, there are still going to be millions of miles between you. And the distance between you becomes a container in which, when you can still love that distance, those differences between you, that's how you stay connected. To know that you're never going to be two become one. All of the Spice Girls, I'm so sorry. We need to recognize the space between us.
That in and of itself is huge.
Especially when you've experienced childhood trauma. Especially when you've experienced the safest person you know abusing you, or who's supposed to be the one you can turn to that you can't, right? especially when we have those kinds of ruptures that were never repaired and may never be repaired. A lot of our parents are never going to apologize. And for a lot of us, it doesn't feel safe enough to ask for an apology.
I feel like we could talk about this for hours.
I mean, honestly.
Oh my God. The fact that we don't have time.
Yeah.
Do all of it.
You did say something earlier about wanting to be accepted. And there is like a quote that I came away from a mindful self-compassion retreat that I worked through. And I think it's really helpful when we're sitting in the struggles of like shame and judgment. And it's a fill in the blank, but it's just as all beings wish to be accepted, valued, seen, loved, so do I wish to be accepted, valued, seen, loved. Because it recognizes that we're in it together and we're just trying to figure it out.
Becca, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So good.
Yeah, we could go on. There's so many more things I want to talk about, but maybe we just have to have you on
I was
again.
going to say, we're just going to have to do it again.
We're just going to have to do it
again.
again.
Because I could go for hours.
Yeah, literally same.
Yeah.
I'm like, how many more directions can I go in? Then I'm like, oh my God, we don't have enough time.
Yeah.
Well, Becca, where can people find you if they want to connect with you more?
I'm in the process of building a website. I have a really wonderful woman doing my branding. So I don't have my own website yet, but right now Instagram is the easiest one and it's Becca Trejo _wellness. I should probably know that.
Perfect.
I don't.
Hey,
Yeah. Instagram is probably the easiest, obviously via email or my Psychology Today. But if it's for therapeutic work, but if it's just for connection, Becca Trejo Wellness.
Amazing.
Yeah, I do teach stretch and sound at Class Studios on Sundays. And I think that's a space where people get to, it sounds so weird, but experience me, experience the grounding, the support on a less intimate, but still very intimate level.
I love that. And I'll put it all in the show notes too, so that people can connect.
Absolutely.
Well, Becca, thank you. I'm so grateful for you.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we did this. Thank you so much.
Me too.
This was so fun.